Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today is the most requested tutorial I have had for dealing with Godot by far. And that is, how do I get my animated textured models from Blender into Godot? And the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of little things you can break here. You can break things in Blender, and when it comes to importing to Godot, it is not immediately obvious. So we're going to go through the entire process, beginning to end, in a very simple version. I'm going to show you how to bring animated and textured models into Godot 3.1. Speaking of which, now that Godot 3.1 is shipped, I am working again on my tutorial series. The Godot tutorial series and the underlying book behind it has fully covered 2D. I'm in the process of updating the book part to 3.1 compatibility, means redoing a lot of workflows and photographs or screen capture so that they match the new user interface. But it's also time for us to move beyond 2D and into the world of 3D. I did a 3D introductory video, but today, again, we are going to get into the asset importing stuff, the part that is probably most requested. Now, one of the reasons why it is so confusing is there are so many options out there and none of them are perfect. So we've got a couple of options coming in the future. There is a new Godot Blender exporter in the works. This is going to run directly as a plugin inside of Blender and make it so that you can export your scenes directly from Blender into Godot. Now, this is still under heavy development and isn't quite ready for prime time yet. Next up, we have another project in the works right now. This was announced a couple weeks ago, but this is FBX support for Blender via ASIMP, or the Open Asset Import Library. FBX is a lot more reliable of a format than what we use today, so that should be somewhat improved, but it's also a proprietary complete cluster format as well. So there are advantages and disadvantages to FBX. Now, ideally, the future of both Blender export and OpenGL import is GLTF. This is the open source Kronos Group 3D format with kind of games in mind. It was for WebGL originally, but this is with 2.0 ideal for game projects. At both Blender and Godot have supported GLTF2. The support is improving over time, so hopefully this is the future. It's just not ready for prime time as of yet. So the way that we're working today is we're going to work with the shipping version of Blender, Blender 2.79, and we're going to use the Better Collada exporter. Now, this is the standard way of doing things today, so that's what I'm going to showcase in this video. Now, if you guys want to see how to use, say, GLTF2 and Blender 2.8, let me know, and I can make a follow-up video for that. The process is slightly different, but a lot of what you're learning today is going to apply either way. Now, what you need to do, obviously, is go to the GodotEngine.org homepage, download the appropriate version for you. So come in here, click download, it'll go to your appropriate platform, grab and install Godot, but then what you're going to want to do is come on down here and grab the Better Collada exporter. All right, so now we're off to the races. At this point in time, hopefully you have Blender 2.7 installed. If you do not, go to blender.org. And again, click download, go ahead, grab the 2.79b version. If you want 2.8, it's close-ish, but unfortunately, the Better Collada exporter has not been ported fully or not been accepted into the main branch yet for 2.8. There is a port of it, I just don't know if it's official yet, but the version you are downloading right here is for 2.79, so that is what we are using today. So speaking of which, let us go ahead and fire up Blender. Now, I'm going to show you this process end-to-end, but I am not going to make a masterpiece here. We're going to try and keep things very, very simplified. So here we are in Blender, and again, this can't be a Blender tutorial. That will take me way too long, but I'm going to show you the entire process as I go through it so that you don't really miss anything or lose anything here. We got our basic model here. I'm just going to take it, and we're going to turn this thing into another shape. I almost always accidentally make something phallic. I'm going to try not to do that this time.
So we'll just bring that shape out here, and we'll scale that down a little bit more. And let's grab this end, and then we'll scale that down to like so. Now I'm just going to grab a couple of edges, so switch to edge mode, and we'll just bevel a couple of these edges into. Give us a little bit more definition, but obviously we're not going for a masterpiece here. Why am I not just holding down Alt while I click so I get the whole thing? Alt, click, there we go. Alt, shift, click, there we go. All right, so we got all of our edges. Hit Control E, bring up edge mode, and we'll throw a bevel on that. Come on, which way is there we go. All right, something is very wrong with my bevel. All right, so there we go. There is our shape that we're going to work with. This is what we are going to now texture. So we're going to show you the process of texturing this guy so you can get it working. We're just going to do a normal map and a
color map on this one, or diffuser or abato channel. And in order to do that, let's go to dev game Right, so if you've never used this guy yet, DevGame is another site that I developed. It has a whole collection of free resources here. We're going to go to free game dev tools. What we're looking for is texture. So we want 3D graphic resources, and you will find a number of different sites on here that are for getting models and textures from. So we'll go ahead, we'll just use this one, CC0 Textures. That is available at cc0textures.com. This is a collection of free textures, and we just want something that we can bring over. So I'm gonna go ahead, grab this paving stone. We'll grab that guy in 2K, save that there. All right, so that will be in my downloads folder somewhere. Downloads. All right, let's extract that guy out. So 7-zip, extract to paving stones. All right, so there are our textures. What we want, all we're gonna do again, in this case, is use color and normal. So grab those guys and let's put them somewhere. All right, so there we go. So there is the 2 textures we're gonna use here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and save this guy to my desktop. So we've got desktop, so, and I will call this thing 1. All right, save that there. All right, so now I have our object. We have our textures we're gonna be working with. We're gonna have to open up a window for that. So we're gonna have to open up our UV edit window. So come on over here, go to a UV edit image editor like so. We're gonna switch over here into edit mode, select all of the faces, and we're gonna do an unwrap. To do an unwrap, just hit U, and then pick the way you want it to go. Now, we actually haven't marked a seam or anything, so we could have done a spherical unwrap or a flat unwrap, a smart unwrap, whatever. But in this case, it's actually pretty simple. Just gonna do Alt-Shift edge selection, and we will do a, where are you? I'm so used to the new user interface that this is getting a little sloppy. All right, so there I've marked my seam, and that's where it's gonna cut. So we'll do an unwrap. Ooh, that is ugly. All right, works for me. I didn't go all the way around the corner, so we didn't get a really good flat unpack, but you know what? It'll work for me. So there we go. We have our shape, we have it unwrapped. I'm back in object mode now, and what we wanna do is make sure that a material is created. Now, this name here is very important because that is what the material is going to be called when you bring it into the Godot side of things. So we'll call this thing1 material like that. And that's really all we need to do on this side of things. Now, what we need to do is actually go over to the texture maps on it. So we got this first texture map, and we're gonna go down here to type, we'll go to image. If there is none, you just go down here and click plus and create a new one. So now what we're gonna do is go ahead and open up, and we're gonna use color channel. So we created the first one. Let's change this, we'll call this guy the diffuse texture or color texture, doesn't really matter there. And if you want to see what you're doing in action, just come on down here and switch this guy over into material mode. So there you see we now have a texture applied to this guy. Our unwrap is pretty awful. Here, let me just do a smart unwrap instead. I don't know that that improved. All right, so what I want to do now with that guy selected, come down here, go to coordinates, and switch to UV. This is under mapping, and then there, select UV map, and there you see. Looks a little bit better, and this looks a little bit better overall as well. By the way, you can switch to the stone underlying if you want to switch. Just use that little window right there. But the key thing is we now have a new material created called, for some reason I can't scroll, diffuse, and we set it up. And we set the mapping to UV and UV map. So now what we're gonna do is come back here, pick the next section down. We're gonna create a new one again. We're gonna open, and then we're gonna grab the normal map right here. And let's rename this guy normal map. Okay, so with that guy selected, we gotta do the same thing. We gotta set up our UV map so that using the UVs that we got. And now what we wanna do is instead of affecting the diffuse or the color channel there, we wanna switch this over to the normal map channel. And there you go, we have a lovely normal mapped blob thing to export to our game. So, and this should all work right now. At that point in time, all of the exporting you've done, we should have materials when we finish our export. So next thing we need to do is add our animations. And this is where things get a little bit trickier. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna switch to side view. I'll get rid of that there so we have some view, like so. And now what I wanna do is add an armature to this guy. That's like the skeleton that's gonna control our animation. So we'll click right about there. And I'm just gonna go add armature single bone. All right, so it's obviously rotated. So we're gonna rotate X minus 90. You can do this by hand if you want. Let's hit the Z key so that we see it. All right, so we're not exactly centered. All right, we're good. All right, so there we have our armature in there. We're gonna hit tab to go into edit mode, and then I can grab the end piece of our bone. And then what I wanna do is hit E for extrude, and we're gonna create another bone out of that guy, and E again, extrude. And now we have our skeleton to control our object. Exciting stuff. By the way, you can do this. You don't need to create an armature. You can just do keyframed animations if you wish, but we're going to do it all out here. So we're going to show you multiple animations because that's an area where this gets kind of tricky at times. All right, so we created our skeleton. Now all we need to do is bind it. So I'll hit tab. I'm back into object mode again. So you see down here, object mode. What I want to do is click the first guy, so the hull, and then hit shift click and hit my armature, and then do a control plus P to parent it. Now when you do that, you'll have an option here for automatic weights. You can paint the weights if you want. That's how each bone influences the overlying mesh, but I'm keeping things very, very simple here. So now we've got an animatable guy, so we could come in here, we could switch this guy over to edit mode, for example, and go, sorry, I want to go to actually pose mode. So, and there you see, we can now influence the outer mesh, and we're good. So now what we need to do is start up our animation. We're good here with our timeline. This animation is way too long though, so let's switch end to 50 instead. So we're gonna have 50 frames of animation here, and I don't really need you anymore, in fact. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch you. You're gonna need two different windows open here. You're gonna need the nonlinear animation editor window, which is this guy right here, and we're gonna need another window. So let's drag that guy up, and then what we're gonna do here is open up and include the dope sheet. Okay, so now what we need to do is create an animation. And we start off, we can basically start frame 0 right here. We can select all of our bones like that and hit I, and then we can pick what you're gonna be doing. Now I'm actually only gonna be doing rotations here, so I'm just gonna keyframe on rotation. So you see it just created a bunch of, it created our keyframe in our timeline at frame 1, and you can see we can now make that work. So we've got a new animation armature up here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and rename this guy. We'll call this guy Bend Up, like so. And this is, consider this kind of our work in progress animation set. So I'm gonna take this guy and we're gonna go ahead and say, all right, we're gonna jump forward in time to frame halfway between, frame 25. We're gonna grab that middle bone right there. We're gonna do a rotate on the x-axis like this. We're gonna grab the next one, rotate x-axis like this. So you see our animations happening over time. I'm gonna do an AA, so I have all of the bones selected, hit I, and rotation should automatically be selected. So we're gonna insert another keyframe, and then you saw we have now an animation going to that, between that keyframe, and Blender will interpolate in between. So now what we're gonna do is go towards the last frame, and then once again, we're just gonna grab this guy, hit R, X, and rotate a little bit more, R, X, rotate a little bit more. Control A, grab all of them again, hit I, and then do another rotation key. So right now, if you see, if we go ahead and play all these animations, we have one animation going. So good, we're getting there, it's looking good. So now what I'm gonna do is commit this guy. So basically I'm gonna go back here to frame 1, and I'm gonna go pop. And that just created that guy. We've got Bend Up now. Now it's important before you commit it, this is gonna be the name that shows up in Blender. Now I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna rename the NLA track Bend Up 2, but this literally has no effect. Now there is one very important thing, I will come back to it in a second. But first let's go ahead and create another animation. Now this is why I have the dope sheet up. If you go to the dope sheet, there is a little button down here, and we can switch that over to action editor. And you'll see if we look in this list, we have our bend up action now defined. What we want to do is actually create another action. So watch up here. So you got no action going on right there. And we'll do do, and then boom, we got a new action, and we'll call this guy bend down. Actually, let's keep our spelling consistent. Bend down, like so. And we got a new set to go with, and we're gonna do basically the same thing. So keyframe 1, do a control A, select everything, and keyframe it. Select the second bone, rotate X, let's go down a bit, and then control A, select everything, and then we're going, oh, damn it. There we go. So let's actually advance the timeline. That was my bad. All right, rotate X there, and let's do both bones. All right, so a little bit, select everything, I, rotation keys, and then we'll go to the very last frame, and then once again, rotate and the X key, and then down, and then rotate X key, and then down. So we got some pretty funky animation going on. So we got an up animation and a down animation. Once again, you can go ahead and play that. And there you see, we've got down happening. So we have this option between these two different animations. We got bend up and bend down. I'm gonna go ahead and commit that guy as well. So we click here and boom. So now you see we have two different animations, and I will again rename this guy bend down. Again, this is the name that is most important. Now, by the way, if you wanna go ahead and edit one of these after the fact, select it in the timeline over here and hit tab, and it'll bring you back into edit mode so you can change the keyframes of that individual action. And that is it. We have a fully textured, normal mapped, animated object that we've created in Blender. The entire process was shown in front of you, so if you have any questions, please do let me know, but that should give you an exportable object. So now we need to export it. Remember earlier on I said we were going to use this guy right here. So go ahead and download this zip file if you haven't already. I don't know if I have or not, so I'm gonna go ahead and save it anyways. And now what we need to do is install that into Blender. That's basically the Better Collada plugin exporter. And what we're gonna do is come back here into Blender, go to File, User Preferences. Now keep in mind, this is under Edit in Blender 2.80, they've moved it. And we go to Add-ons, Install Add-on from File, and this should be in my Downloads folder. So let's just navigate over there. There it is. Click that guy, zip it, and then go ahead and click the checkbox beside that. And if you're going to be using this guy over and over and over again, save the user settings. Otherwise, you'll have to do that process every time you want to do an export. But that should be done. Let's go ahead and do a save. Save our guy, a file, export. And now you'll notice Better Collada is here at the bottom. Now there's also normal Collada right here. Now the important thing about better versus normal is, for one, you can't have multiple animations if you use the normal one. So this process just doesn't work. All right, so now we've got it. Now I'm gonna show you something very, very, very important and confusing, and what will break in your animations will not show up if you do not do this step. So this is very important. Before you export in your, what is this actually called? The NLA Editor. Go here, see how these say, do channels contribute to result? You want to mute both channels, turn both of those off, or your animation will not work. Trust me, that one cost me some time. So that is the key thing there. You need to mute them before exporting them. Why? I don't know. If someone knows that, let me know in the comments down below, but do be aware this part is very, very important. All right, so now that we've done that, we'll go ahead back here to the export, and we can do Better Collada. Now you'll notice under Better Collada, there are a number of options here. So we're gonna export this guy out to our desktop. We'll call it Thing1 DAE, that works for me. You got a couple of different options. I don't need to copy the images because they're on my desktop, but if they're in a different location, you might wanna toggle that on. Godot seems to enjoy it being triangulated as a result to not get some errors. So that is an option right there. This basically just turns your quads into tries. It should be optional, but it is definitely a good idea. I'm gonna leave everything enabled for now. Now keep in mind, this will export the camera and lighting from your scene. If you wanna just export, say, the mesh and the armature, you just hit Shift and then click the ones that you wanna keep. Now the key thing is though, you have to export the animation and you have to export all actions or you won't get everything you want. But now we should be good to go. We'll go ahead, we'll do that export. And if I look at my desktop, we should now have Thing1 DAE. Okay, so we're getting there. Now what we need to do is fire up Godot. And that is right here. And we'll create a new project to demonstrate how the import process works. So we'll call this new project. Sure, I'll call it new game project. And we'll create an edit. And here we are in trusty Godot. So now I should have a new folder. So I'm gonna need a all right, C:/temp, new game project. All right, so there is our Godot project. So see here, I'm not doing anything. Godot is fired up. We're in a new project. But what I can now do is come back here, and we can basically, so that's where I want to copy to, and I minimize to my desktop. I'm going to go ahead and grab all of our guys, and then we're just going to go ahead and drop this into here. So not move, copy. All right, so those have just been imported. You'll find if you head back over to the Godot quick enough, all right, it's spitting out because it's doing the import. It's importing those assets for you. All right, there we go. So you see here, it's firing up, bringing them in. Now to check it, you'll want to make sure that a dot material was created. Now a material file should be named, should be created, and remember, the computer is not happy with this import process. It will use the name that you gave. So remember back here, when we defined this outer mesh and we gave it a material, something weird's going on. We called it Thing1 material. So let's head back over to the Godot engine, maximize this guy out, and you'll see Thing1 material was defined. And then we have Thing1.dae ready to be instanced in our game. So let's go ahead and create a 3D scene. And let's drop a thing 1 into the world. There you go. You see a fully textured object in the world. We're good to go. So what about animations? Well, let's find that out. So go here. Here is our object. Let's get the guy a little bit more centered. And do we have animations? Let's go into the edit mode and we'll open this guy anyways. We can't make any changes because we're working with so we'd had to create another version of if we wanted it. But you'll see here, we now have our object. We come back here, you'll see bend down and bend up are defined. Now again, if these don't show up, it's generally because of something you did on the Blender side, especially that mute button. If you do not mute your action fields, you will not get these guys. But you see here, there is bend down, there is bend up, and there is a normal mapped textured object in your game. And really, that's kind of it. We can go ahead here, we can look at the material, you could change things up. So you see here, we have the diffuse channel came in as the color map that we defined earlier on. The normal map came in as the one we defined. Now, there's something weird going on with my coloring on my computer across the board. So ignore the fact that that looks a little funky, but it basically is this guy right here. And you can see it's being applied in the scene. So there you have a fully animated, multiple animation, textured, normal mapped, no special actions required material brought in. Now, if this part does break, you'll have to basically bring in your textures yourself and hook them up here. So you go into the albedo channel, go to texture, you come here and basically just say load and then pick your files. But in this case, the import process worked 100% perfectly and we are good to go. Now, one other thing I should have probably pointed out to start this video, but I didn't, is you have one other import option. And that is the, what the heck is it called? The OBJ format. And that can be brought in for static textured meshes only. So if you don't have animations, you can also bring things in with the OBJ format. The nice thing about the OBJ format is it's really, really, really simple. So it should streamline and minimize your workflow for the most part. But that is it. Hopefully that answered all of the questions that people had. Here you have, again, the end result. This guy we created. It's beautiful, isn't it? Created it from scratch, animated it, rigged it, exported it, and here it is. And you can see without any further work when you're on the side of the Godot engine, it's all there. Now, one thing to keep in mind though, is when you're dealing with something like thing 1 here, once you've imported, you select your DAE file, you can go to import and you can actually change the way that it's imported. You can change some settings for how it works. So you see here, we can change the root type. You probably don't want to do that. You can change out how the materials are set up. You can change out the frame rate of the animations that are brought in. You probably want to synchronize this in your development environment. So in Blender, I was developing at 30 frames per second or 29.97, and here I'm running at 15, so things are probably going to run a little bit differently, but it does seem to actually, let's see, 2.04, and I said 60 frames. So yeah, it looks like it's automatically 50 frames. But that might be an area where you want to tweak it a bit. But if you want to change the way that imports happen, you've got these settings that you can go ahead and tweak. You can change not too much here actually, but if you want, change something here, and then you can basically do a re-importer and it will bring it back in. You can also split it up into clips if you had your animation defined as one long sequence of animation. But I like using the action strip approach better. I like having multiple animations like this, and then you can blend them and deal with them dynamically on the Godot side of the fence, not in the Blender side. So that's it. Hopefully that answers all of your questions. You know, you kind of get into some more advanced features of texturing I'm not really touching on here, but you'll notice that if you open up your material, you have support for a number of different maps, metalness maps, roughness maps, so on. But basically, it's the same process across the board. Now, again, it's slightly different with Blender 2.8. I'd be interested if somebody follows this, see if you can apply what you're just taught here and get Blender 2.8 working. Or if you want a separate tutorial on how to do the exact same thing using, say, Blender 2.8 and either the new Collada exporter I was talking about or the GLTF format, do let me know and I will cover that as well. But I think this covers the basics. It should show you pretty much everything you need to know to get a modeled, rigged, animated, textured object from one platform to the other. And once you get like the little tricks down, really it's little things like this stupid little mute icon, which is again munged up, that will bite you in the ass. And if that fails, if you've got this set and you're still having problems, make sure that you double check that you're using, number one, that you're using Better Collada, and that you don't have anything like selected objects, which will only export the selected object out, or that you've got everything you need selected here, that you have animations selected and actions selected. Those are your most likely to screw up areas. But that was it. Hopefully that helped, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.